What is there to say? I guess I'm a little bit down on my luck right now between jobs. I had two job interviews earlier this week, and I'm hoping to have more soon. I don't like to admit this usually, but it might be important for your book. I'm actually homeless currently. It might surprise you that I actually came from a fairly wealthy family. My dad was some sort of hotshot furniture salesman, and my mom was a cable TV installer. We actually owned our own house. It was double wide. But yeah, I guess I always thought I'd be a big success like my parents, and I guess it's just all right that they're not around anymore so that they don't have to see what my life has turned into. You know, I didn't exactly meet their high expectations. I used to work at the Bellflower as a professional gambler. That's actually how I met Mr. Davenport. His security guards thought that I was cheating, actually, so they brought me in for hours and hours of questioning. Thankfully, they looked through the security footage and saw that I was not cheating. They could have just kicked me out, but Mr. Davenport was so kind, and he actually put me in a room for a full week to make up for the trouble that had been caused. This is the nicest hotel I've ever been in. Oh, I've been an orphan almost my entire life. Yeah, my parents died in a fishing accident when I was really little. The only living relative I have is my Uncle Albert, but we don't really talk at all. He's been in and out of prison my whole life. My Uncle Albert? Oh, he goes back to prison all the time. He's actually serving a life sentence, but he keeps escaping. I don't know how he keeps getting out, but the guards catch him and put him right back in. Albert is from the dark side of my family. We didn't like to associate with them very much growing up. We were always a little bit ashamed to be related to Albert's side of the family, to be honest. I mean, I know that I'm not some great success or anything like that, but at least I'm trying to better myself. Albert's mom was a lawyer, and his dad was a member of Congress for over a decade. It's like they didn't even try to have honest jobs. My parents used to take me fishing on the southern coast of Alabama. I don't think we were supposed to be fishing at the spot they found, but there was never anybody around to tell us to leave, so we did it anyway. It was really nice, and almost like a real vacation. Anyway, we didn't have a real boat. We had just 3 of those floating pool chairs that we'd like paddle out and just sit there and fish. It was really relaxing. Anyway, one day my parents caught an undertow and the current pushed them out deep into the ocean. So luckily I managed to get to shore, but it took me a while to find anyone for help. The authorities searched and searched for them, but all they could find were their pool chairs, empty. It was really bad, but I was placed into the foster care system. I wasn't in the foster care system for very long. When I was 9, I was placed with a foster family, but unfortunately, my foster parents died the first night that I was with them. A burglar broke in and murdered them. My foster mom was able to call the police, but by the time they arrived, they were already dead. And the police couldn't find the burglar anywhere. The prosecutor on the case assumed that I had murdered my foster parents and even accused me of killing my birth parents. So he got the judge to sign off that I was going to be tried as an adult instead of a child, even though I was only 9. Luckily, they did find the real killer, and it turns out he was just really good at hiding, and he was in a crawl space under the house. So unfortunately, due to this legal loophole that in Alabama I was now considered legally an adult, so I was out of the foster care system and I had to find a job. So I worked in a coal mine. It wasn't the work I wanted to be doing, but it paid something. And then when I was 18, I moved out of Alabama. I didn't have much money saved up, so I had to hop onto a train like they do in the movies. Only it wasn't exactly like how they do it in the movies because there were no big empty cars with those open sides that you could just hop right onto. The best I could find was a small platform that stuck out from the train a couple of inches. I was able to put my feet on that, and then there was a handle that I could cling to. I figured that I could just stay like that for an hour and then I'd be across state lines, but unfortunately, the train picked up a lot of speed and I was stuck clinging onto the train up until Detroit. Well, I hadn't intended on going to Detroit, but since I was there, I decided to make the most out of it. I got a job as the mascot at a children's restaurant. It was kind of a cheap ripoff of Chuck E. Cheese. And I had a costume that wasn't so much a cute mouse as a scary rat. But luckily, the kids didn't seem to mind too much, but I was only there for a little bit anyway. The first time I got my paycheck, I went to the bank and I was still in my rat costume. And unfortunately, 2 bank robbers came in, also in costume. So when the police showed up, they assumed that I was with them and arrested me along with them. I was able to sort things out at the police station and I got off, but my picture in costume was already in the newspaper, so my boss didn't like seeing his mascot on the front page of the newspaper for bank robbery, so I got fired. My first job interview was for a job selling jewelry. I didn't have any experience, so they said they couldn't hire me. My second job interview was at an adult video store. They needed someone to clean up those video booths after customers used them. I also didn't have any experience with this, but I really wanted the job, so I lied and said that I'd been doing it for 15 years already in 3 different cities. I thought for sure they were going to hire me, but for some reason they didn't. I guess that was karma telling me that I shouldn't have lied. I wasn't always homeless. Actually, when I was in Alabama, I had 3,000 square feet to myself. I felt like a wealthy land baron or something. But I didn't have a house on the land, but I did have a really nice tent at first. It was great. I lived there for a full year before I could save up for a house. Well, not a house. I actually bought an 8-foot by 10-foot shed that was fantastic. It was just as good as a house. Had a roof, 4 walls, a window, a door, everything I needed. I don't know why more people don't just live in sheds. That was the nicest place I ever lived. Unfortunately, 2 weeks after I bought that shed, it was swallowed in a sinkhole. So there was really nothing left for me in Alabama. I decided to chase my childhood dream and move to Albuquerque. Oh, that was the wildest thing. I actually ended up here in Vegas by accident, but while I was here, I figured I might as well try gambling. It turned out I was extremely bad at it, though, and I actually caught the eye of a wealthy man who asked me to be a professional gambler for him. So he would give me money to play craps, and then he would bet on me losing. And we actually made a great team, and he made a ton of money off me. But the casinos started noticing what was happening, and they started kicking us out. Mr. Davenport was the only one who was really nice about it, though. Well, I didn't mean to end up here, but I was on a bus on my way to Denver, and the bus stopped here, and I got off to use the bathroom, but I guess I took too long because when I came back out, the bus was gone, and it also had my luggage on it, so when I got here, all I had was the clothes on my back. But I'm glad it happened because I had a really good time here. Oh, he was a rich person just like you'd see in the movies. I mean, he had a 3-piece suit on with a jacket and a matching vest and everything. His car had a hood ornament on it, and he even had brown socks to match his brown shoes. I wouldn't know what to do with that kind of money. I think the first thing I might do would be to buy a monocle, though. I've wanted a monocle my whole life. I've had really bad vision in one of my eyes since I was a little girl. This one time I found a pair of glasses that had a missing lens, but the lens it did have was very close to my vision needs. So I had that. It was perfect. Almost perfect. The lens was on the wrong side, so I did have to wear them upside down. Eventually, I tried to take the lens out and put it in the correct side, but when I did, the lens cracked and I couldn't wear them anymore. Well, I wasn't in Denver proper, but I was about half an hour away at this ski resort very close by. Anyway, I worked at the ski resort first as a ticket salesperson, but then I studied and worked really hard to become a ski instructor. But sadly, like all my jobs, it didn't last. The first time I took a group out to go skiing, I was supposed to bring them to an intermediate level hill, but unfortunately I read the color coding wrong and I brought them to an advanced hill. There's a huge difference between an intermediate hill and an advanced hill. I, of course, lost my job. Ever since I was a little girl, I wanted to move to a big city. You know, one of those places that musicians write songs about? A place like Albuquerque. When I finally moved to Albuquerque, it exceeded my expectations. All the glitz, all the glamour, it was incredible. And the best part was the people were really nice. It was great. I'd probably still be there today if it weren't for the puppy incident. A little boy had lost his dog, and the entire community banded together to try to find it. Every business had some sort of poster in the window asking for people to find the dog, and I actually came across the dog, but unfortunately it was already dead, so I buried it. And then I wanted to do that thing that they do in TV shows where you replace one dead animal with a new alive animal that looks the same. So I went to every pet store in town until I found a dog that looked like the dog that I had buried that had died. I brought it to the little boy's family and they seemed so happy. It was great until about 2 weeks after that when I found out the truth. The little boy and his family weren't looking for a lost pet. Unfortunately, they were looking for a dog that had bitten the little boy. They wanted the dog to see if the dog had rabies. Since I didn't bring the correct dog back, they couldn't test the dog, and it turns out the dog that bit the little boy did have rabies. That's why he died. The story doesn't have a happy ending for the little boy, and I couldn't face the townspeople anymore, so I had to move out of Albuquerque. Oh, I've done it all. I've delivered pizzas, I had an ice cream truck, I worked in a pet shop, I even worked on a cruise ship. I've had some truly wonderful jobs, but sadly nothing ever worked out. I worked at a really fancy pizza place that had a big dining room and everything. It was great. Anyway, the owner, my boss, was trying to sell it, so the potential buyers were coming in to see it and to go over the books. The owner said that we had to look as busy as possible when they came in to make a good impression, so anytime there was extra space in any of the pizza ovens, we just started making cheese pizzas. I was given the cheese pizzas anytime I was making a delivery, and I was told that I needed to just throw them in the dumpster, but I felt really weird about doing that because the town had a lot of homeless people. So instead, I decided to do a good deed and pass them out to them instead. After the potential buyer had looked through the restaurant, he was being driven back by my boss to his hotel room, and on the way, I guess they saw about 20 homeless people with our very distinct pizza boxes. I don't know what he thought, but he didn't end up buying the place after all, and I lost my job. I got a job at a pet shop, but I only worked there a few weeks before I got fired, unfortunately. Before I worked there, I really didn't know anything about animals, so I did learn a lot on the job, thankfully. Anyway, my boss would have me open up, and then he'd come in a couple hours later, around noon. And one day, we got a hamster delivery, 2 hamsters, and my boss had left a note saying, "Put them in a fish tank." The thing is, my boss didn't specify it was supposed to be an empty fish tank, so I put them in a fish tank that had fish and water in it. It also had a lid on the top. Anyway, the hamsters almost drowned, but thankfully we had this machine that was pumping air into the bottom of the tank, so the little guys were really smart and they took turns breathing out of the air hose. It was a dream of mine for a really long time to have my own ice cream truck. I love the idea of having my own business, being an entrepreneur, and selling wonderful sweet treats to people over jolly music. Anyway, it took a really long time, but eventually I did buy my own ice cream truck. Well, it wasn't actually an ice cream truck, it was an El Camino, and it had 2 freezers full of ice cream in the back, so anytime I wanted to sell ice cream, I'd just have to park and get out and go around back. It was great, and I'd still be doing it if I hadn't lost my license. I wasn't just selling ice cream out of my El Camino, I was also living in it. The ice cream chests in the back were plugged into the cigarette lighter inverter, so the engine had to be running at all times so that the ice cream wouldn't melt. This made it really hard to sleep. Anyway, one night I had a few drinks and I was trying to sleep, and of course the engine was still running so that the ice cream wouldn't melt, and a policeman came over to see what was happening. I didn't know this, but you can actually get a DUI if you're drinking while your engine's on, even if you aren't moving, so I ended up being sent to prison. I actually got really lucky with my prison sentence. I was sentenced to 3 months in prison, but they let me out after 2. Also, I was sent in right before Christmas, which was great because on Christmas Day, they gave everybody a delicious cinnamon bun. It was the best cinnamon bun I've ever had. I guess sometimes Lady Luck is on my side. That was the most amazing job I've ever had. It was also the shortest. Unfortunately, the first time that we went out, we actually hit an iceberg and sank like the Titanic. Some of the lifeboats got destroyed, but most people were able to get on one. The rest of us had to survive by climbing onto the iceberg. After the ship sank, there were over 80 of us stranded on the iceberg, and we had no way to call for help, no food, no water. So out of desperation, we took off our clothes and we tried to form a sail out of them, hoping that we could ride the iceberg to shore. The sail we made out of our clothes didn't end up working, and it didn't move the iceberg at all. Actually, after an hour, it just blew away in the wind anyway, so we were just left there half naked and freezing. Luckily, a cargo ship came upon us and they were able to rescue us from the iceberg. But we didn't speak their language and they didn't speak English, so we couldn't explain to them why we were all half naked on an iceberg. They dropped us off in Quebec after a very awkward trip. I don't know what happened to the other survivors. When we got to Quebec, we all just separated. Hitchhiking back to the United States from Canada was really unpleasant. Everyone only spoke French and I was still half naked. Luckily, someone did stop and they had a pickup truck, so they let me sit in the back, and they stopped 20 miles from the New York border, which was great because I only had about a 6-hour walk back to the States. I know they say you shouldn't hitchhike because it's dangerous, but the thing is, I've had a lot of luck hitchhiking over the years. The first time that I hitchhiked, I was going from Detroit to Albuquerque, and these 3 really nice dudes in a hippie van picked me up. It turns out they were a traveling folk band, and they taught me how to drive so that I could drive down the highway while they were practicing in the back. It took a really long time to get to Albuquerque because they kept having to stop for shows, and we did have to camp in their van every night, but it was still great. You know, I've met my fair share of famous people over the year, but this was really cool because they were real musicians, and we got to get pretty close. Also, by the time we got to Albuquerque, I was so good at driving that I passed my driver's test the first time. I met Orville Redenbacher at the airport once. It was awesome. He was in line trying to get his luggage, and I thought, should I approach him or should I not? I imagine a famous popcorn magnate like that is probably constantly having groups of people swarming him trying to get his autograph. But anyway, I decided to go for it. So I went up to him and I said, "I love your popcorn commercials." And he was really flattered and turned out to be a super nice guy. He even signed my cast. Anyway, that was in 1997. I found out later that he had actually died in 1995, so it couldn't have been him, but it was a really nice old man, and it was still a really fond memory. Oh, I wasn't at the airport to catch a flight. Sadly, I've been homeless a few times throughout my life, and one of the tricks that I picked up was that you can go to an airport and pretty easily find a place to sleep. I think they're used to having people who need to find a quiet spot because their flight is delayed or there's a long layover, so it doesn't look too weird if you find a spot and just sleep there. But there is a trick, and that's to not overstay your welcome. So after 7 or 8 hours, you gotta get out of there. Also, you should never go back to the same airport twice unless a few years have passed. I found a few creative places to sleep over the years. You just gotta know the tricks. A lot of homeless people will choose gas stations and fast food restaurants to sleep at overnight, but I think that's actually a really bad idea because they're out in the open and the employees are probably gonna have to kick them out. So when I was homeless, I always made sure to find a very hidden spot. So, for instance, I once worked at a fast food restaurant and I noticed that there was a ladder out back. So I climbed it and there was a beautiful roof that I could sleep in. Anyway, I slept there every night that I was working there and just made sure that no one saw me go up and no one saw me come down. So I had my smartphone, thankfully, to set an alarm to make sure that I'd be down in time and also get to work in time. It was working really well for a few months, but then eventually someone did see me go up on the roof. They figured out that I was sleeping there, and I did get fired, but, I can't really blame them. I always thought that smartphones were such a waste of money, but honestly, once someone told me about the food delivery services and how much money you can make doing those, I had to get one. And I'm glad I did. It worked really well for a few days when I had my car. But sadly, all those miles really wore it out, and I had to bring it into the shop, and I just couldn't afford the repairs. So I ended up just getting a bus pass, and that was how I was making my food delivery runs. Didn't work quite as well. Actually, sometimes I would have to transfer to multiple buses, so it ended up taking like an hour to deliver something. Eventually, I just kind of stopped doing it. I wasn't making any money. I broke my arm at the zoo. You know those signs that warn you not to feed the animals? Well, you should really pay attention to those. I tripped over one, landed on the sidewalk, and broke my arm. It was okay, though, because I had an appointment at the hospital later that day anyway, so I just had my doctor fix my arm then. Oh, I've been to the hospital a lot. I tend to get hurt pretty easily. I've had so many x-rays and MRIs. I'm surprised I don't have superpowers. I've broken a few bones over the years. I've been in all kinds of accidents. A hunting accident, a skydiving accident, normal stuff like that. I broke my leg hunting. I was sitting in a tree with my friend and we had a few drinks and she told a really funny joke. Anyway, I was laughing so hard that I lost my balance and I actually fell out of the tree right on an 8-point buck. They still gave me credit for the kill. When you see people parachuting on TV and in movies, it seems like they're being gently lowered onto the ground like a feather. But I am here to tell you that is not the case. Even with the parachute, you're actually falling really fast and impact can be really rough. I found that out the hard way. I was walking around and a skydiver landed right on top of me. Actually broke my arm in 2 places and gave me a concussion. I never saw the skydiver again, which is too bad because I'll never have a chance to thank them. Well, If it weren't for them landing on me, I wouldn't have gotten a concussion, so I wouldn't have gone to the hospital, and they wouldn't have given me an MRI, so I never would have found my brain tumor. They say there's nothing they can do for me, but at least now I know I only have 3 or 4 months left to live, so I can start checking things off my bucket list.
That poor woman never catches a break, does she? I don't suppose it would be logical to leave a hotel to someone who's not going to be alive much longer than I am. Well, all 4 candidates have potential problems, but someone has to take over the hotel. I don't have any more potential heirs, and I've run out of time to keep searching. Now, you've spoken to all of them. Who do you recommend? The only reason I was considering Sara was because she seemed so virtuous. But now that I know she's in a 3-person marriage with 2 older partners, I see no reason to choose her. You make a good point. I may disagree with one of her life choices, but I doubt I could find a more caring person with strong moral values anywhere. Did you know that she spends her Friday nights teaching the homeless how to read? I didn't know that illiteracy was an issue among the homeless, but she's actively doing something about it. She's the obvious choice. Would you like to tell her? You deserve to be the one who breaks the good news.
It's no problem at all. We really enjoyed talking to you.
Is there anything else we can do to help you with your book?
Is there anything we can do to help him? He has no family and no close friends? That's awful. We'll be here for him, right?
Well, I have to be to work on Tuesday. Why don't you stay here and keep him company, and I'll come back after work on Friday.
I'll stay too.
The animal shelter and the food bank can get by without me for a while, but someone has to teach my literacy group on Friday. Can you do it?
Oh, I can handle that. Why don't you 2 stay here, and I'll come back next weekend. The more people hear for him, the better.
All right. Thanks, Daddy.
Where is Mr. Davenport now? Can we see him?
What do you say we go try to cheer him up?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, let's start with our first word. All right, can we sound it out?
K.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
T.
Okay, now let's try putting some letters together.